Hello. On week 5, we are starting to look into various types of strategies. So we'll get started a little slower this week. First of all, you'll have some information about Porter's generic strategies. These are usually sort of the motherhood statements, the types of strategies that organizations do not stray away from. So there's two basic kinds: cost strategies and differentiation strategies. Now, both of those could be applied to a focus market or to a more of a general market. And it's also possible to use them in a mixed environment. So let's talk about that for a little bit. So first of all, I think cost strategies, we recognize right away organizations like Walmart. And, the reason why I said that organizations don't stray away from their main generic strategy is that Walmart, as an example, at one point in time decided that they were going to cut back on the number of products that they had, and so that they could, for one thing, cut back on some of their cost in all of the number of suppliers that they had. But also they wanted to introduce some clothing lines and other products that were maybe a little bit higher price. In fact, what it did is that it backfired on them. People came to Walmart, were very upset when they realized that the products that they had come to expect to be at Walmart were no longer on the shelves. And also, Walmart wasn't a place where people were looking at paying more for clothing lines. Like, I think there was a Jacqueline line at that point that Walmart was making an attempt to market. And they had to come back to their old strategy and rethink after several months of declining sales. So, this is one example. There are many others. If you look at, for example, the much higher end line like designer clothing, and as an example, if they want to introduce a product at a lower price, usually they do it under a different name. And so they want customers to feel like there is the prestige of being associated with the higher end line, but they also don't want to confuse customers, and make sure that their differentiation strategy, focused differentiation strategy in this case, is not fouled by having a mix prices and quality and so forth in their products. Now, in terms of having a mixed strategy, there's different authors that have different opinions, and some will say that mix just doesn't exist, and in fact, they either fit under cost or differentiation. But I think that organizations like Costco are a very good example where you can get products that are inexpensive. They've certainly tried to decrease the cost of operation as much as possible by having very few employees and most of their products sold in bulk. But at the same time having higher quality item and at a good price. Not necessarily at the lowest price, but at a fair price. And so that might be an example of a mixed strategy. So the other component in this week is to start to think in terms of using TOWS that are perhaps more reflective in nature than what we've seen under the internal and external environment analysis. So TOWS is an example, and the idea here is that you take your strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat assessment, the SWOT, and you try to reflect on what you could do to minimize some of the weaknesses and the threats, take advantage of some of the market opportunities that are coming forward, and use your strength to further develop or grow in the market. So essentially, TOWS stands the reverse of SWOT, and then you're really taking each of the strength and trying to see if there's a way to utilize some of those strengths to gain some further advantages, and looking at some of the weaknesses that you have and finding ways to decrease some of those weaknesses and mitigate some of the threats, so that these are options then going forward that you might choose to undertake in developing your future strategy. So the TOWS is a very good tool for that reflection piece. And often what happens when we do a SWOT analysis, it's very much of a mechanical exercise, and people, here's a whole pile of strength, here's a whole pile of weakness. And, we don't really think in terms of when we look at the whole, what does it really mean in terms of doing things differently? And the TOWS really force you to not only look at the whole reflectively, but maybe extract some additional innovation ideas or creative ideas from doing the analysis. There is no set discussion on the board for this week. We'll come back to that next week. There is your reflection report due at the end of this week, so we'll give you a little bit of time to work on that. And of course, you've got your case one that was assigned at the beginning of the month, so you have an opportunity to complete, or to not complete, but to work on that assignment as well. So a little bit of elbow room for this week. Still a number of interesting readings to do, and next week is going to be packed again. So have a good week through this material, and I'll come back next week with another video. Thanks. Bye-bye.